Yeah, you never pull that string.
All right. Um, as folks are dialing in, looks like Heather dialed in also. Hey, in the audience, can you guys check to see that the chat works? Just say hello in the chat just to make sure.
There we go.
Okay, it does. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you.
Steve, this is a series this is one in a series of talks that you've done, and this is the third one, fourth one.
Yeah, this is the third one of the year of our live Q&As. The idea here is we know that insurance is confusing and convoluted and hard to navigate. So the more information we can put out there, especially in a venue like this where we can answer questions directly, hopefully we'll be able to show folks that it's not as scary as all that. And if you've got a support system, if you've got a genuine interest in learning, you can do this successfully. So I appreciate you being here, giving us the opportunity to talk about your expertise and share that knowledge also. You know, I've had my time as an optician and running practices and figuring out the math behind vision plans. And, you know, I know you've been doing RCM for over 20 years. And actually, you know what? 7 o'clock just hit. While folks are starting to file in, if you could just tell a little bit about your story. How did you get involved in billing and specifically optometric billing?
Thank you, Steve. Well, it's a pleasure to be here, honored to be here with you, you know. And so you've developed quite a name in the industry. And so if I can get a little glory from associating myself with you, Steve, I'm thankful. So my name is Shane. I How I got into this was really um, because kind of the circumstances, luck. I had worked at a health insurance company out of college, and I did that for 5 or 6 years. And I've got crosswise with my employer and just quit. I went and when I went home, I told my wife, taking the next job I find, whatever it is. And 3 days later, I was doing billing in an optometry office. I didn't know anything about optometry at the time. I didn't know the difference between an ophthalmologist and an optometrist, but I knew billing, I knew processes from my previous job. And so I did get the job. They gave me the chance and quickly increased this fella's income dramatically. He went from like a 600K practice to a $1 million practice, and he wasn't doing anything different. He was just getting paid for what he was doing. He was giving away a lot of care. There were a lot of opportunities that weren't even recorded. He was doing it, and but not getting paid for what he was doing. So um, we went in there, got his fees right, got his schedules, and identified the patient's responsibility, all those types of things, and got him contracted. And then lo and behold, he was making more money. So it kind of went from there. He had friends that were asking him, how are you doing this all of a sudden? Because this was a long, well-established practice. And so I replicated it for a couple of his friends, and it was John McCormick, his name, and Mike McCormick. And he was nice enough, both of them were nice enough fellows to go, look, there's something here. So I managed that practice for a better part of a decade. And so I got that domain experience. I think that is one thing that's differentiates our offering from some others is that these are not ambiguous, esoteric problems. For me, I lived it for a while, for a good long while. But I built a business. It got acquired by another big name. Think of the biggest name in the industry, biggest name in the industry. Business got acquired by that parent company. I eventually became disillusioned and didn't have the ability to affect service levels like I once had. And so then I left and worked through a non-compete and was, blessed enough to reach out to Steve. And next thing you know, I'm here at Anagram doing it again, but with a business that is really bought into it and is building the things that are necessary and couldn't be more connected and invested in it. So there you go. There's my little story.
I
But
appreciate you sharing that. And I've heard the story before. One of my favorite things about getting to work with you is the way that I remember the story is you told me you left that organization when you could no longer be proud of the work that you were doing. And I think that is so telling of the kind of person that you are and the kind of effort that you want to put into this. And certainly what we've been able to build at Anagram in partnership as is a direct result of that approach to things.
Steve, yeah, the the reputation was worth more than the check. It got to a point where I was telling people to believe in this product. I was still the face of it. I was still out there, um, you know, preaching, going to trade shows, evangelizing, telling people about but I no longer really believed what I was saying. And then I felt dirty, it didn't feel right.
Yeah.
Didn't feel right.
Yeah.
Uh, Left, but it was all a blessing. I got tons of experience. Every time you do something, you do it better. You learn from every time. And so I've learned a lot of lessons over the years. And so now I've got the benefit of all of that experience and a company that believes in what we're doing. This is not a side project for Anagram. You know, it was a side project for that other company.
Right.
They just kind of, in fact, I think anyway, I'll keep my opinions to myself, but it wasn't their core competency. It wasn't what they truly leaned into, and it reflected that. But that's not the case here. It's all in for Anagram. And so um, I believe that we have built and continue to improve an offering that I don't think the industry can touch, quite frankly. No offense to anybody out there.
Well,
But
it's excellent. It puts us in a good place. The topic we're here to discuss this evening, and everybody, thank you for joining, registering, participating. It is a general medical and vision billing Q&A. I have some questions here that we've sourced from our customers and other folks who raised them. But as you guys in the audience think of questions, feel free to drop them into the Q&A section, into the chat, and we'll answer them as they come up. But to kick us off, start kind of at the beginning. What is the difference between credentialing and enrollments?
okay. And that's a great question. The credentialing, for the purposes of our conversation, people conflate those two terms often. And so, for purposes of the conversations you have with me, credentialing is the process of getting in network with with a payer, let's say a payer, not necessarily a medical payer, with a insurance company. Coming in network, having them steer business to you, and what they get out of that is a reduction in rates. So you agree to a fee schedule. So maybe your normal charge for fundus photography is $80, but their fee schedule is 55 and some change, right? And so they get the benefit of that lowered expense, controlled expense. You should be, as a provider, getting the benefit of business being steered to you. It's a double-edged sword on that, Steve, because people, a lot of times, healthcare providers, they go to get contracted and they get frustrated because the payer has closed off the credentialing. And it's frustrating. But once you get on it, you want them to close it off, right? Because if too many people are on it, then the business being steered to you gets diluted and it loses its value to you. So it's a double-edged sword from as a provider. Once you get on, you want them to stop letting people on. But so there's credentialing, process of getting in network, enrollment. Enrollment refers to the paperwork necessary, ironically, to send and receive electronic transmissions, right? And that's a big point of failure in setting up clearinghouses. You set up a clearinghouse, and some payers, let's go with Medicare. Medicare requires an enrollment form in order to be able to send claims electronically. Okay. So you could be contracted in network with Medicare and unable to send them claims. Sounds like a flawed process, right? Why, if you
Yeah.
became credentialed, don't you think they'd give you the ability to send in claims? If you're a tiny provider, they'll allow you to send paper claims, but if you're of any size, that's not allowed. And then you have to go through this process of enrollment. Some payers require enrollment in order to send claims, another enrollment in order to check status, another enrollment in order to check benefits, another enrollment to check, get the benefits sent back. You send this paperwork to the clearinghouse. The clearinghouse sends it to the payer. They process it. And now the payer knows where to send data back and forth to and receive data and where to send it back. Some payers don't require it at all. Some require a form for all processes, one form, and yet other payers require multiple forms for all of the different processes. And so it's a confusing topic for people. And I think a fatal flaw for some of our competition in that the provider is the entity, the client, their client are responsible for setting up all this stuff, right? Which introduces error. If you have gaps in your data, if your enrollments aren't done, and the ability to send electronic claims or get the remittance back, the more common scenario, then that's going to lead to gaps in manual processes and a lack of data, there's confusion. And so, yeah, that's the difference. The ability to send and receive electronic data versus getting actually in network.
Got it. So, if you could, can you give a sense for how long it takes to get credentialed with, and we're talking about Medicare, so let's take that as an example. From the time that I, as a practitioner, decide I'd like to be credentialed with Medicare, how long does it take me to fill out the paperwork to get approved? And then once that happens, how long does it take to do the enrollments for it?
So the credentialing is a frustrating piece for everybody. It's not rocket science, it's just very tedious. And if you forget a little piece of data, you don't sign a little box, then they're not very proactive in coming back to you and telling you that it was incomplete. And so you have to be very anal and on top of it. Um, and really, when I'm going through this with somebody, I tell them, call the insurance company on a regular interval, even if you feel like you don't need it, and annoy them. If you're annoying them, then you're probably doing a good job, right? Staying on top of it. Because what you do, you fill out all this paperwork. CAQH is a thing. That's where you go in and it's standardized across some different payers. But send in all your paperwork with all your certifications, your license, your malpractice insurance, all that kind of stuff. And then you send it in, and then they meet on a regular basis. Regular basis, let's say every 2 months, every quarter. And then they'll process all of these things and decide who's going to get a network, right? The problem is let's say you forgot a document and you think and they're not very proactive about telling you this, right? So then you send it all in, they get to it, you're missing the document. Okay, you reach out, they tell you, yeah, you're missing the document. Now you got to wait another 3 months for them to meet again. And so it just stretches out, the time. So it's not overly complicated. It's just tedious. And a lot of companies out there that do it, we don't do it because it's not in our core competency. If we don't feel like it's something we're going to do well, then we try not to, we just stay away from it. If we tell you we're going to do something, we want to do it really, really well. But there are companies out there that do it, and yeah, it's a frustrating. I hear all the time people chirping about their credentialing company. It's hard. It's
Right,
tedious.
right. And there's a lot of room for mistakes and it delays the process. So if you're diligent about filling it out or you partner with somebody who can help, that can accelerate the process. So let's jump ahead.
Yeah.
We've filled out the paperwork. I'm credentialed. Now I want to set up my enrollments with my clearinghouse. So I presume like I've got to choose a clearinghouse, right? And then once I choose one, there's some credentialing paperwork to do. What is that
Enrollment.
process like?
Aha. See there, you just did it.
Ah, yeah.
See, right? Enrollment paperwork. So I don't know if you did that on purpose to throw it over the plate for me, but there you go. Yeah, that would be a Steve thing to do. So bright. But yeah, you choose a clearinghouse. Now, a clearinghouse, for those who are the uninitiated, right? It's a clearinghouse. You look up the definition of a clearinghouse. It's a business that aggregates data, right? And so aggregates payer data for in this case, right? And so that you can centralize everything and be able to not lose any particular piece of data. So If you do, you set up this clearinghouse, you set up the pipe to the insurance company. Now you have one place to go in order for all of this stuff to work, right? And so instead of going to 15 different sites to pull eligibility, you go to one site and it goes out and pulls all the eligibility and pulls it back. Same way on submitting claims, same way on claim status inquiries, same way on payment data. It all comes back to one central place. And a lot of times your EHR, or not your EHR, your PM system, can sometimes has direct integrations. And so you can get it so that it's seamless in the background. You know, you set it up, tie it into your system, and your system's got the data, and it behind the scenes is going to the payer and delivering it back into the PM system. So, yeah, so you need to fill out that enrollment paperwork though. Oftentimes, you know, we handle that for our clients. One, we provide the clearinghouse for our clients because I feel like one, people don't understand exactly the role it plays, and two, if it's left to them, the setups are going to be incomplete. It's not what they do for a living, and then that's going to introduce error. So it's a good business prospect for proposition for us to provide it and to do the setup for people so it stays off their plate and it makes our business more sound. But yeah, you do that paperwork. It seems like you're doing it when you're doing it. It feels like you're doing it with the clearinghouse, and you are. That's the business that's facilitating the transmission. They're collecting it and sending it out to the payer. But make no mistake, just like with credentialing, the payer has to process the paperwork, right? You're dependent upon that. So some payers will process that paperwork lickety split, and others will take 3 weeks. You know, just it just depends. Medicare is usually
But
the sticky.
so how wide is the range for that? Is it like the let's say the quick ones will do it in
Days.
2 weeks, 3 weeks,
Oh,
days?
days. The quick ones.
Okay.
Yeah, the quickest ones. We can do it in days if the data's there. Medicare is the longest one, and it like the average is 3 weeks, but it um or a little less than that. But that it's not the so much there's still processing it, but they just require a lot of data too, right?
Right.
So one of the things that people have to provide us is called a PTAN, and a PTAN is like the equivalent of a NPI, but it's issued by Medicare. Oftentimes people don't know their PTAN and they have to get it. We can't call and get it for them, right? And so
Right.
that's a bottleneck. So anything with government is a little less efficient than, I don't want to get off on that, but anything with the government is probably a little less efficient than the private sector. And so there's that aspect of it. They just require a lot of tedious information that people don't necessarily have on hand.
Sure. Yeah. So you touched on a couple of things during that answer that made me want to ask kind of an obvious question. Something that comes into my inbox all the time is, there are lots of different opportunities to outsource your RCM in eye care. There are enough companies that say they've been doing this for a long time and have a lot of expertise. So I think the point that you made that made me want to ask this question is that we include the clearinghouse as part of your partnering with us to do your RCM. So that's TriZetto. When you're using Anagram for RCM for building services, we include TriZetto in our fees. But what else sets us apart in your mind?
Well, that's a big one because that's a really big one because that general their business model out it's the most common. They're the market leader. TriZetto is, and their business model in optometry doesn't what their business model to the general public to healthcare in general. They haven't changed it for optometry, right? And they don't understand that it's a different market, and so providing it. Sometimes getting a clearinghouse for as an optometrist for a small business, you start to question whether because medical is not every person that walks in the door. You know, there's a lot of managed vision care, and so maybe 30% of the claims are going out through a clearinghouse, or maybe a little bit more than that. But their business model is to charge X number of dollars per provider, right? Maybe that provider is not doing a whole bunch of medical, and so their fee it becomes this thing where optometrists question the value of it. I've negotiated our own deal that allows us to provide it and it not inflate our cost. So, so beyond that, I know you asked beyond that. Financially, there's two tenets of it that make it different than the market. One is the clearinghouse is provided. Two, on managed vision, we do manage vision care. Some of our competition does not. The only thing that we do not do are coordination of benefit claims, which we will facilitate. And then we don't submit claims that drive to order, which thankfully is becoming less and less. Right, in the industry, there's a trend there. So if you're cutting them in house, in office finishing, but we can do those. But back to your question, and I'm rambling a little bit. We don't include the chargebacks in our calculation. You know, most businesses that do this for a living, they take a percentage of what is received. With this little caveat, they add the chargebacks back in on the vision. So they have a rate that's misleading, in my opinion, in my humble opinion. They may say that their vision is, I don't know, 5%. 5% of the money you receive plus the chargebacks, right? And the chargebacks can be significant. So I would tell the audience, if they're going and shopping and looking, make sure that you take those two things into account, because I don't know of another RCM business that includes the clearinghouse in our space. And most of them flip the sign on the chargebacks. Some of them don't know what a chargeback is. That's another thing, right? But we're optometric. Another aspect of it is, Steve, is that we're an optometric RCM company. We're not trying to be anything to anybody else. And there's enough nuance to this business that for businesses that are doing all specialties, they get lost in optometric billing. They don't understand managed vision care and the whole chargeback scenario and all of that, medical necessary contacts, all those types of things throw them for a loop. And it's our day-to-day work, you know. So that's a big differentiator. And our processes, they're built to scale, right? And so from the beginning, the developers here, the same very competent people who have built open access, have been focused on building this RCM offering. And so I know you've heard me turn this phrase many a time, but we're not cooking for a family, we're cooking for an army, right? And it's a different process. Both end up with a meal. But what happens to most RCM businesses is that they're great cooking for a family. And then they try to cook, their business grows, they try to cook for the army, and they don't have the ability to scale. And then it becomes this constant back and forth of going in, lighting a fire underneath them, getting them to focus on your account, getting it better, and then it gradually, the service levels degrading until you do it again and until you become disgusted with it and leave. So from the beginning, we've been building processes that allow us to provide boutique level service, but at a mass scale, you know.
What about the software? What sets the software? Because I know that was a big part of what we've been putting together to clarify communication and so forth. How does that
Oh, the
set
specifics
us
of
apart?
the software. So yeah, so I gave a generalization that we've been building all this, but some of the specifics of that. One, that we built these things that I'm about to talk about. We're not buying these attributes from other companies and cobbling them together. These are homegrown, right? And they allow us to tweak them and make them better. And as things change, go and accommodate things. So that's an underlying foundational principle of all of this that gives us a competitive advantage. But kind of starting from the beginning, we have a scrubber. One, we're PM agnostic, right? So it doesn't matter what practice management systems people use, with some exceptions. That system has to have enough ability for us to be able to manipulate it. So there's a few systems that are excluded, but we work with the majority in the space. And so we'll take the data from your PM system and then go push it through a scrubber that was built. And our scrubber is amazing, and it becomes more amazing as the months go by. They keep working on it. But one
Let
of the
me
things,
interrupt you for a second. What is a scrubber?
scrubber, so it takes the data. Thank you. Sometimes I get a little too nerdy and make these assumptions. So these PM systems, they'll generate files, 837 files. That's a standardized file format that has loops and segments and all the data that's in a claim, right? And so a lot of RCM companies, they visually scrub. They'll go and look for the presence of data, but they're not necessarily looking for the validity of that data, right? And so their individuals are just making sure that all the boxes are filled out. We built an engine to ingest all of that information, that file, and not only check for the presence of data, but the validity of it in ways that I know really don't exist outside of our space. So yeah, for example, so the LCDs, NCDs, CCIs, for the people out there that do this, right? Those are Medicare's rules on what diagnosis codes drive what procedures. And so with TriZetto, you can pay up and have those rules applied to commercial payers. There's a little problem with that. These aren't the rules for commercial payers. These are the rules for CMS, for Medicare. So it's something, but it's not the ideal solution. So talking to the guys and the engineering and the founder of the business, and I tell them about this. Well, let's go build a scrubber that will take the individual rules from every payer, the medical policies, take that in, apply those, and when we drop the claim into the scrubber, it goes and finds that payer ID, finds that medical policy, and looks for the diagnosis code to see if it drives it. So that now, of course, the event's already happened by then, right? But that shortens the cycle. That gets everything paid a little quicker because we're identifying that this is a problem even before it goes out. The latest thing that they've done is
Wait, pause. Sorry. I want to interrupt. Keep that in your head of what the latest thing that they've done is. I don't want to lose sight of
Okay.
the scrubber and what the benefit of applying those rules through software for a practice. So there's a possibility of claims getting rejected and claims getting denied. And I think speaking of the distinction between those two things and how the scrubber applies would be really helpful for the audience.
Sure. Yeah. So a rejection is a claim that is not accepted for processing, right? And so the easiest, most common thing would be, let's say you transposed a date of birth or the name was slightly off. They give a nickname. And a piece of data is invalid, right? Not that this diagnosis doesn't drive this procedure, but this diagnosis is invalid. Maybe it wasn't to the fifth number, maybe whatever it is, it's an invalid piece of data, right? So either the clearinghouse, the individual who's got, depending on their expertise, the scrubber, the clearinghouse, the payer, they all can look for these things and go, nope, this is not ready to be processed because there's something wrong here, right? We built this scrubber to do what all these other things do to the nth degree so that we can identify it earlier in the process rather than going all the way here and going, nope, right? Now that exaggerates the pay cycle. So that's a rejection, a claim that's not accepted for processing. It's an important distinction against denials, which are claims that are accepted for processing, but don't warrant payment, right? So let's say on a denial, the diagnosis code was for a retinal issue and the procedure was a corneal topography, right? That diagnosis doesn't drive that procedure. It's accepted for processing, but it denies, okay? The clock starts over on that claim. It was accepted. The rejection was never accepted, right? And so the timely filing denials, if somebody's getting CO 29s, if you're looking at your remits and you see a bunch of 29s, that means it was a denial for timely filing. Doesn't mean necessarily you may go, well, I submitted that. Yeah, but was it rejected? If it rejected, it was never actually accepted. The clock didn't, they don't have They couldn't identify the patient, for example. So then claim was never accepted. You didn't get back to it until past the timely filing. You corrected the thing, maybe sent it in, and now it's denied for timely filing. So that's an important distinction from rejections to denials, so that you make sure you eliminate your timely
Well,
filing.
and it sounds like in general, billing has a bunch of stuff like that, from enrollments and credentialing to rejections and denials, words that could sound interchangeable but mean very, very different things.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a good point. Yeah, I like to say that all this stuff, if you break it down to these conversations, I dare say that everybody in the audience has understood everything that we've talked about, right? In its you take one of these things, it's not that complicated, right? It's like throwing a ball up, and you can throw one ball up and catch it. Put 100 of them there, and you're going to drop 99 of them, right? And so all of these things by themselves are not that complicated, but you put them all together and it becomes something. And it's kind of dry. So for people who don't like it, it may not be, they may not be pulled to understand it, you know.
Well, absolutely. I think one of the things that I find myself talking about fairly regularly is that the folks that work in eye care didn't get into eye care to do
Yeah.
paperwork for insurance
Yeah.
companies,
I,
right? To chase the money that they should have gotten maybe at the time of service, and to try to become an expert at billing while also being an expert optometrist, while also navigating all of the economic stuff, while also navigating all of the marketing stuff.
for sure.
It seems so challenging to do all of this successfully as one person or as a couple of people.
Yeah.
And a lot of the common knowledge in the industry, sorry, Shane, a lot of the common knowledge in the industry has said, be independent, do everything on your own. And to some extent, cool, right? Be independent and do some stuff on your own. But when you're talking about words that are maybe not deliberately confusing, but definitely confusing,
Yeah.
and processes that don't align with any kind of intuition that you can have. Like, the Medicare rules might apply to some private payers, but not all of them, and maybe none of them. It depends.
Yeah.
NCDs and LCDs and CCIs sound like stereo equipment. So, like, how do you figure that business out? There's a lot to wrestle with. So I appreciate you helping to provide the clarity here. So in light of that, you're going to say the thing they built after the claim scrubber, which just to kind of summarize, the claim scrubber is a piece of software that makes it more difficult to submit a claim with either incomplete or incorrect information, and in so doing, preventing rejections and denials of your claims, and in so doing, making your cash flow better and making you a more profitable business.
That's right. You said it very eloquently. That's right. You're
Okay,
not removing the error. You're
right.
identifying it earlier to shorten the cycle, right? And I'll give one more example of that. That is something that our business is building the ability to deal with. Let's say that the provider put four diagnosis codes on they recorded four diagnosis codes, but didn't link them properly, right? There's nothing fundamentally wrong with the claim. Nothing's invalid. It's going to go through and be a denial. That's going to be recognized as a denial, manifest as a denial. Scrubber is going to see that diagnosis code doesn't drive that procedure, and then suggest to our team, hey, but the third one does, right? And then we can go and shorten that all up without it going all the way to the payer, coming back as a denial, possibly getting lost in this, and everything. So sorry if I was a bit redundant there, but it's a real world
No, no,
example of how
yeah,
this turns lost revenue into money, you know.
context makes all the difference. It's cool to talk about, like, look at this thing that it does, but with a real example of how this might manifest. I think it makes it easier to understand. So, you're saying we're building another thing. What's the next
Yeah,
thing up?
I'm gonna go out on a limb and just talk about it. I don't know. I might get my hand slapped here, but
All right,
it's
everybody in the audience here live, this may be edited in the recording, so you're getting a preview.
that's right. So, what's the most common denial in our space? Anybody
Uh,
here want to?
oh yeah, I think I
Yeah,
know this one.
yeah. Just give the audience the time. What's the most common denial for optometry?
The most common reason for denial, right?
Mhm. Are people answering, Steve? Or
No, I can't see if they're typing, but
okay,
let's um, what is it? What is the
okay,
most
okay.
common denial?
I'll tell a joke while we're waiting. Hey, Steve, a weird thing
Oh
happened to me.
no.
Weird thing happened to me today.
Okay.
I was walking down the sidewalk. I got hit by a soda can, but I'm all right. It was a soft drink. Okay.
Woof. Oh my goodness.
All
See,
right.
this is what happens when you guys didn't answer quickly enough.
All
I
right.
get
The
punished.
most common, the most common denial in a face is no routine. No routine eye exam on the health insurance, right? Probably makes up 35% of denials. People billing in 92004 and 14 with a refractive, a preventative diagnosis. And there's every reason to do it because when when it's present, it reimburses 2.5x what a managed vision care payer will pay. So there's a lot of motivation out there to do that. However, it doesn't exist on all the policies. It exists on some policies, and people in our space maybe don't have time to go check that regularly. It is confusing to check. So when we're trying to reduce error on our side, that's one of the first things that we're looking at is how can we do that? And so our developers and founder, they worked hard to build a eligibility engine. So part of our scrubber is built to go check for that benefit, right? And so we will take and go find those benefits and see the presence of it. Now it's still being built and so that we can refine it. Right now we're checking for the presence of that benefit and flagging those before the claim is sent. So our team can go and when the benefit is not there, not whether it's been exhausted, not whether it will, but just is the benefit there? And if it's not there, then we'll flip it around if we're doing the vision for somebody, and then we can build their managed vision care, avoiding the denial entirely, and then um, and then getting them paid quicker. What would happen in the past is go all the way to payer, deny. Do you get to all your denials? We do, but that's our business. But do the clients? Maybe, maybe not, right? And then does it ever get transferred and billed to the managed vision care plan? So we're finding that really early, and at some point, it will make its way to the market, not being an internal tool, but an external tool, and that will be an exciting day for Anagram. So
I should say so. So everybody in the chat, you are officially sworn to secrecy. You did not hear what was just discussed. But I thank you for sharing that. So, yeah, that it's an incredible tool. I think that's going to be coming, certainly for the folks who use our platform for RCM services. But the ability for medical eligibility checking is
Yep.
going to be pretty potent, I would say.
Yeah, we'll be able to
Um,
check for if that part gets edited out, Steve. Let me do it real quick. Uh, we're going to be checking for preventative services for office visits, for surgical procedures, laboratory procedures, all those benefit types. Um, right now, we're checking for eligibility, whether the policy is active and those types of things before submission. But we will get to where we're checking all of those benefits.
cool. Someone in the chat, Shane, we got a practice owner that acquired their practice about 6 months ago and renegotiated their TriZetto arrangement.
Oh,
They're at first hundred, about 52 cents per claim is what they're paying for TriZetto. And just to clarify, in the Lacey, if is that the only fee you're paying to TriZetto, just a per claim fee? Is that right? Yes, yeah. So that's all she's for TriZetto. That's all she's paying, about 52 cents a claim.
is it? And there's no minimum.
Apparently not.
That's
And
it.
right now, that practice is doing between 35 and 40 claims through TriZetto a month.
Oh. Good. No, that's not bad. Then
Yeah,
good job negotiating, you know.
that's what I said.
Yeah. Yeah. They TriZetto, they're the market leader. They got more connections with managed vision care payers than other. It's 100 for $52. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's like a phone thing. Yeah. And then when you get above the 100, then it's going to be a different fee. And the question I got for you, Lacey, is rhetorical, and you can go back and look. Does that include ERAs? Does that include claim status inquiries? Advanced coding edits is a thing that they have. That's the LCDs, NCDs, and CCIs. They are. I love TriZetto, but they add on a bunch of stuff, right? Online claim correction, that's an add-on. So, and one that seems like it should just be included. So that's one thing, Lacey, to go back and look and see what all bells and whistles you get for that 52 cents. There may be other things that help you with your efficiencies that are worth it, you know?
But
Um,
the timing is okay. It looks like paying for TriZetto and an RCM, which that I mean that's different. That's because then the RCM, I think, presumably is helping you out with some of that, so you're not worried about what's missing. But if they ever find something that's missing manually, my guess is that it takes a little bit of time for them to get that question to you, and a little bit of time for you to get that answer back to them, should something be missing. All yeses across the board. So the nice thing about this, and Shane touched on this a little bit earlier, I'm going to give your voice a rest for a sec, Shane. With our software, we have a communication tool that you have access to as a customer, where in the event that something goes wrong, something is missing or denied or rejected, a lot of the RCM companies in the space, they will call your practice and leave a message saying, "Hey, we're missing this piece of information." And then whoever at your front desk is responsible for taking messages will write it down on a post-it, and maybe they'll give it to you and maybe they won't, or maybe it'll be timely and maybe it won't. That stuff is pretty difficult to tell, and maybe that message gets lost in the shuffle of your practice being busy, or hey, it's Thursday and I'm out on Friday and it doesn't happen until Monday, and delaying your ability to fix that right away. With our software, we built a communication tool where our team can notify you, hey, this thing is missing a piece of information, and it stays open as an inquiry until it's resolved. So those things do not fall through the cracks.
yeah. And if may expound on that, emails, they send about, it's a flawed process, and bunch of emails, spreadsheets that you're having to try to manage and go back and which email, are the emails answered? Who's answering them? Did they send them? You lose track of all that stuff. And then these spreadsheets, which version of the spreadsheet, it's the touch point. It's the other touch point for the client. Like, so in our process, you're pulling benefits, seeing the patient, and answering missing information requests, right? And so when I got to Anagram, that was the first thing that I took to the team was we need to think about how we can reduce the burden of this touch point. Because that's really what we're selling, right? Reduce burden, increased revenue. And so what can we do to make this piece less cumbersome and really ask fewer unnecessary questions, right? A lot of you're paying a business to try to take on this burden, right? If they just transfer this error and manifest it to you and go, hey, there's an error here, not a whole lot of value there, right? So we try to
Right.
work on it prior to it coming to you and reduce the number of unnecessary questions. And it's so let's say that the policy number, let me give you the most common example. Member not found. Okay. It comes to the client, they pull it up, there's the card in the system. Somebody just forgot to key it into the field. Right? It tells you that they weren't really thinking or
Right.
trying, right? They were just pushing data back and forth. And that reduces the value of the service that they're selling. So we do everything we can to not ask you dumb questions, unnecessary questions. And then we have a platform that's kind of like a cell phone. It's like it's like texting on a cell phone. And all of our teams can communicate with each other, and we can see how long this data is in the question is in each spot. And there's an escalation uh, process if it's not getting answered. If my team is not responding to you, all those things are able to be monitored because they're in this app within our app and not a bunch of emails that are siloed and not subject to scrutiny. So.
Yeah, I think that makes quite a big difference. I know the Jeremy Anagram, co-founder and CEO, has a tendency of saying the speed of communication is what something like the speed of communication is what differentiates success and failure, right? If you don't know what one side of the business is doing, if you don't know a mistake that happened in time to fix it, it can lead to a bunch of other things down the road where you couldn't have foreseen it. That's one of the primary points of that communication piece, making it easier for us and our partners to track and understand what's happening. And it changes kind of the dynamic where as we were entering this space, something that I heard from colleagues, doctors that I've known for years, is that lots of outsourced companies just want to get it done as opposed to being invested in growing the practice's business. And I know that's not the approach we take. We don't want to just get it done. We want to improve every facet of it so that your business is stronger, because then our business is stronger.
That's right. Absolutely. If we're just some faceless, nameless business that's pushing data back and forth and don't demonstrate some care and understanding, we try to be flexible, as much as is possible and have good service levels. If there's too many exceptions, then it introduces error. We have to stay within the kind of the bounds of the platform, but we understand that, you're unique like everyone else, right? Everybody's got a unique set of circumstances and so we do our best to accommodate those things. Sometimes we can't. Sometimes it's just it introduces too much error, but when it's reasonable, and we can accommodate those things that we try to and try to improve the business because there is it's mutually beneficial, right? We get paid when our clients get paid. So if everything's always going to deductible and they don't understand that, then we need to try to help them, right? Try to help them understand that. And we're getting better and better at doing that. Reporting is being improved as we speak. And some of the other things that we've developed that allow us to feed back that information in a way other people may struggle with is that we've built our own tool to segment out and parse denial information. So most businesses will address their aging by running a spreadsheet out of their system and going and working that. And that's fine. That's the cooking for a family part. That's okay, right? But you can't do that as a RCM company. You're going to lose track. So the team here built a tool that ingests all the remits and parses out that data so that I can tell you the denials by payer, procedure, provider, and adjustment code, right? So if someone wants to know, hey, how many fundus photography denials do I have for Aetna for experimental diagnosis codes? We can tell them. And we can tell them as a percentage of all their Aetna. We can tell them as a percentage of the entire business, of their business, and compare it to all of our. So we're working on reporting to be able to turn that external. But that platform exists now. And so that allows us to control the data and that allows us to have really good service levels.
Fantastic. Lacey says she's been in eye care for 28 years and lots of experience, but medical and vision is tricky. So here learning about Anagram and providing beneficial info. So thank you for that, Shane. But her note actually prompts another question, something that's not necessarily related to what we do. Talk to me a little bit about coordination of benefits.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So coordination of benefits, one of those terms that kind of means different things to different people. Coordinating benefits between two policies, right? coordination of benefits. That could be a primary and a secondary, which is well within our ability, right? As long as it's in the system, we can bill a primary. Let's say the wife has a policy and the husband's a secondary, then the spouse's is secondary. And so we can transfer the data, process the spouse's policy. That's coordination of benefits in some people's eyes. So billing secondary and tertiary, that's a thing, and we can do that. In our space, more often people refer to coordination of benefits as sending a claim to the health insurance, taking that result, and then sending it to the managed vision care plan. And the pros of doing that, let me go through the pros. The pros are it's going to reduce the copay to the vision copay. So let's say that ultimately it will. So let's say the vision copay is $10, the medical copay is $20. When that processes, you're going to be made whole, and you're only going to have to collect the $10, not the 20, right? The vision company is going to cover the difference. So it reduces the copay, the patient's responsibility to the lower copay. And then the refraction. So if the health insurance doesn't have a refraction, maybe they covered the health related portion of the eye exam, but not the refraction. And then the vision plan does provide a coordination of benefit, then you can send that claim over and you'll get the difference between the medical and vision copay and the refraction, right? So there's the get, which is good, especially for a practice that leans into medical, right? Because the higher medical copay may be a barrier that the patient doesn't won't embrace, right? And so having all this eliminates that barrier. Okay, that's the positive side of COB. The negative side of it, not all these plans have it, right? And when that payment comes in, you're not really sure. You have to be really on top of your game before all of this is done to know not to collect the medical copay. Right? So you'd have to have all these benefits lined out. And then when the health insurance comes in, have some way of discerning this one does need to be transferred to the health insurance and to the vision plan and billed as a COB. This one does not. This one needs to be transferred to the patient and billed. So that's a very can be a very cumbersome and confusing process. And really, I don't believe that our business, with all of the variables there, would shine doing it, right? We would be mediocre at trying to manage all this it takes the practice identifying before all this even happens that this situation exists. So for us, be honest with people. I don't think we'd be average at it, and so we don't want to be average. So better to tell people that, And so what we do provide is when the health insurance processes and the 92004 or 14 pays, but the refraction does not. We'll make a list of those things, those instances, and follow the practice's direction. If they want us to transfer it to the vision every single time, then we'll do that, give them the list, and then they can go investigate and see which ones they want to bill. They want us to transfer it to the patient, give them the list, and that's what we'll do. So we'll make a list of all the times where this scenario could take place, and then they can decide what they want to do from there.
So even in a circumstance where we don't necessarily want to do the coordination, we'll provide the practice with enough information where they can do it.
That's right.
Great. Great. Awesome. I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball, but before I do, we are about 8 minutes away from the top of the hour, and anybody in the chat who hasn't had a chance to ask a question yet and would like to, now is the time. Okay. Shane, you ready for that curveball?
Yeah, I get it. Let's go. What is it?
Fantastic. In practice, circumstances arise, and I've read it on forums often enough where doctor wants to bill a patient to the medical because there's a medical diagnosis and a medical procedure associated with that, but the patient has expected a vision claim submission. How do you effectively, as a practitioner, communicate, hey, patient, this is a important thing for us to do, and you need this medical treatment, and your medical insurance might pay for this medical treatment. How do you communicate that in a way where the patient understands, your staff can do it, no, and people, I was going to say nobody gets mad, but that's nuts in
Yeah.
today's world. But like, let's mitigate the mad as much as we can. How do you have that conversation?
Yeah, there are. So there, the power of the white coat, right? So this is it becomes a thing with the practice on how much of this burden does the doctor is the doctor willing to own, right? And so if the doctor says, I need to run this test because the findings are XYZ, and they're armed with information, right? They pull the health information ahead of time, which is a struggle for people in our space. They have a hard time pulling the benefit information on the health insurance policies. So one thing that you can do to make a business better and just organically have the business grow is pull that health insurance information prior to the patient being seen, identify what the patient's responsibilities are, and have that laid out so that everybody can have that at their disposal. In the absence of information, people are reticent. How much is this going to cost, right? And so if you have that information and it's delivered by the person in the white coat, most of the time people are open to it, and it's been disclosed to them, right? They're not going to get mad about it. They may decide against it, but they're not going to be upset. But now, so you go and render it in the absence of information with no communication. The doctor goes, "Oh, we go run this test." They walk them out, and they're expecting a $10 managed vision care uh, copay, and now they have a $40. Yeah, it might introduce a little anger because they weren't kept in the loop. So information being shared is key, and who's sharing it. The doctor can't do everything, but the stuff that they can do certainly helps the practice. The acceptance rate on fundus photography. We'd run when I was managing a practice, we did a little A/B test, right? The front desk introduces the idea, the doctor introduces the idea. When the doctor introduces the idea, the penetration of that acceptance of that test is like 80, 90%. Because the doctor is asking and it's something that they need. When the front desk does it, they're selling something.
Mhm.
And so I digress. So
No, I don't think that's a digression at all. I think that's a really important component of understanding how to do this.
yeah. So if you can pull that information ahead of time, and Steve, it smooths out the entire process, right? If someone has pressures of 18 and 22, right? I'm not a doctor. I just hung out with a bunch of them. So that 18 to say that. So it's 18 and 22, right? There's a difference of four. One's above a 20. They could go run another test, right? If they feel it's medically necessary. There's something there to hang their hat on. If they have the information and go, look, I'd like to go run this other test. It's not a guarantee, but my folks who are pretty good say it's probably going to cost you another $15. You're good with that? We can go run this test. Most most people are going to be just fine with that, you know.
Right.
It
Right. Yeah, I think
you get somebody who's just drawing hard lines, so then they're making a decision, and that's okay. But
right.
presenting it to them ahead of time, yeah.
This like aligns very well with a lot of the conversations I've had on Best Practices, the podcast we've been running with Envision Magazine, where so much of the success or failure of any given thing has to do with communication. Internal communication, like with your organization, so that they know how to have the conversation and your policies and your procedures around that. But communication to the individual who is actually in charge of making that call and having them do it in an informed and logical way. And to your point, right? You could do the best you can and communicate and say, yeah, like our billers say it's going to be about $15 for this, and they can draw a hard line and say no, and that
Now they
can
made a
happen,
decision.
but yeah, but they made a decision on it, and like they're not mad, they just like said no, they're not going to pay that extra thing, and your part there is kind of done. Although I will say, as a practitioner, if your patient is not allowing you to exercise your standard of care, that's another decision that you got to make.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I know other providers, sometimes this conversation, I'm glad you brought it up. Um, it's one of those
All
that
right.
people don't want to have, right? Because doctors will say, "Well, I'm a doctor. Do you go to the doctor and they ask tell you the cost of an X-ray? They just go run the X-ray, right? But um, and people get mad, right? They just so if you can accept that and be like that, and people get upset about their unexpected bills, they just don't care, right? And I think that um, they're afforded that luxury oftentimes because one, maybe they're in a specialty that is not as competitive as optometry, and two, there's a retail side to optometry, right? And it's a good thing. Other doctors wish they had something to sell. It's fun. Optometrists have a bit of a complex about it, but other doctors wish they're selling nutraceuticals and they wish they had a thing. But introducing unexpected financial burden may affect the business in other ways, right? And so being the reality of it is that to me that's the best process is doing all that. But back to your point, Steve, about educating and getting ahead of it and communicating for the opticians out there, think of the difference. The glasses are late. Think of the difference when you call the patient and tell them that they're late or they call you, right? If they call you, it's a whole nother conversation, right? And so telling people what the cost of something is or what you had expected roughly and that it allows them to make informed decisions. And then the level of care and everything else. The front desk is not scrambling to pull things afterwards. They know what's expected when the claim comes processes, so it helps the entire.
Yeah, absolutely. Standard of care is something that I find myself discussing often with doctors when I'm delivering CE or in study groups, whatever the case is. And it's something that I think you make a really good point. Eye care is a little bit different. Optometry in the States is a little bit different because there is that retail component, and a lot of docs feel a kind of way about it and don't want to sell eyewear. They don't like the notion of sales as part of their medical practice. And if you don't investigate that, it makes sense. But if you actually think about what glasses really are, yes, they're a retail component, and yes, there's fashion associated with it. And yeah, you can look pretty cool in sunglasses, but eyewear is eye care. They're not separate things. It's not a different thing. And to put it in context, if you've got a patient who has a great eye exam and has a tremendous experience with your techs and your front desk, and you're a great doctor and they whatever you give them a good prescription, but then they get out to your dispensary, your optical, and they get a pair of glasses that they don't like, think about how they'll feel about the rest of that experience. Do they really care that your front desk was nice and that their tech was good and the exam was great? No. What they care about is they got a pair of glasses they hate,
Yeah.
and that's all they're going to remember.
Yes. Yep. You put if you can put all of these things in this same taking that line of logic and applying it to what my aspect of the business, right? They can have a great experience. They get a big bill afterwards that they didn't expect. Then it tarnishes the experience, right?
That's
So
right.
having all of this information kind of in a nice little package and it conveys to the business, to the patient that this business has got its act together, you know? And
Excellent.
are you always right about it? Not always, right? It's an estimation, but doing your best there reduces that error.
Right.
So
Exactly. Shane, I want to thank you for your time and your insights here, for answering my questions. Audience, thank you guys for being here, for asking your questions and participating. If they want to get in touch with you, Shane, what's the best way for them to do that?
yeah, my email address is shane@anagram.care, and I would love to talk to some people. Yeah, love to talk about whatever your particular situation is. If you have a question, again, I said, I'm happy to troubleshoot it with you and see if we can help you either as a business or just if you want to bounce something off of me. Happy to have this.
And I'll share the same. If you have questions for me, steve@anagram.care, happy to help out or direct you to where you might be able to get some help. The recording for this will be available in a couple of days. There may be a chunk missing in the middle. We'll see. But thank you, everybody, for being here. Really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your night.
All right, thank y'all. Thank you for coming.
Bye, everybody.